Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. This is actually the very first live I have ever done with Tom Sykes. Hi, Tom. Thanks for being here. And
Hi,
for the
Shauna.
next 30 minutes, you're going to get a grilling, baby. You have no idea how many questions I've got prepared. So I hope you've had your coffee this morning or your tea and you're ready to go. I saw
Bring it
your
on, as
live
the king wouldn't say. Hmm.
I saw your live with your sister Plum on your Substack, and I really enjoyed it. She is such a hoot, and she gave so many amazing insights into sort of the background, the behind the scenes of the fashion world, particularly in Paris. And she had some really valuable insights into Meghan too. But there's something you said that really captured my attention, and it was a simple thing. But you told the truth about the fact that Harry and Meghan's team actually notified you about Balenciaga. And I thought, wow, I've never heard any journalist ever admit about being notified about an event before. You're quite rare to do that, I think.
Yeah, do you know what? It was a deliberate thing. I did thought I would mention it because it's actually quite interesting how they set up their press team. It's basically an emulation of what the palace have been doing for years. So the they've had a very difficult relate. Right, it's fair to say that Harry and Meghan have had a very difficult relationship with the press. But about I'd say about 3 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago, they basically fired their entire existing press team, who were actually very competent and very nice people and very professional, and would certainly respond to a query, and appointed a whole new organization. It's headed up by a Californian lady named Meredith Maines. And one of the things that they did, which I think is actually quite clever, is they just started a WhatsApp group with all the kind of royal reporters in it, just as a way of sending out press releases, basically, because the reality is that people just don't check their email anymore, right? So in the old days, well, I don't know, I don't know what happened before email. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. How did we get press? Were they mailed? Were they posted to us? I
We
think they
wrote
were.
letters.
Yes, or they phoned us. They phoned us up and they said,
Yes.
"Well, this is happening." Um,
Yeah.
then, of course, it moved to email. But the reality is, people just don't check their email anymore, and we have so many emails that it's impossible to get to. So I think the kind of move to WhatsApp is quite sensible. But of course, when you have a big WhatsApp group with like 25 journalists in it, you can only send very generic kind of stuff. So it's quite useful if they can share operational stuff like that. It's quite useful, but you're never going to get anything beyond what you can literally read in the Daily Beast or Substack. it,
Yeah. Yeah.
5 minutes later, you're never going to get any inside information from a
Right.
group WhatsApp,
No.
understandably. But yeah, it's quite interesting the way that for years, having said how awful the palace press operation was, they're now basically emulating it, which is I think completely reasonable, and they've got to communicate with some people somehow, but people just don't people don't read their emails. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, probably even watching tonight, don't realize that a lot of royal journalists are also in that WhatsApp group. And also, a lot of royal journalists, for some reason, hide the fact that they have any, direct notification from Harry and Meghan's team. They won't admit it because they're too scared of the backlash, I suppose. But it's interesting that you just came out and were truthful. That did impress me a lot. I wanted to get into Meghan in Paris, legs up in the limo, and the lights of Paris gliding by. And I saw your article you did in the Daily Beast, and I've got a
Mm.
quote. And this quote I quite agree with. What once looked like a clean break between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal world now feels blurred. Now I'll accept that because Europe, Paris is a lot closer than Melodrama Cito, so I'll accept that one. But this one nearly sent me into apoplexy. Meghan remains every inch a duchess. her title still confers an extra sheen that makes her a serious media figure. I would argue that the only sheen she had was what Daniel gave her, the highlight on her face. I seek to understand you, Tom. Explain that. Explain that quote.
I think that what I'm trying to say is that she still attracts attention because of her title. And of course, there is like an incredible irony that, people who've spent 5 years literally slamming the royal family at every opportunity, saying how awful they are, accusing them of being racist, accusing the whole institution of being outmoded, of being colonial, of being prejudiced, of being racist, are still using these titles. But the reality is that the Duchess title does give her an extra sheen to people who don't know, right? So you and I and the people watching this, we're like the 1% of people who know the story, right? Or the 2% of people who know the story, yeah, who understand that she's not allowed to use the HRH, but she does, who understand that she's been allowed to keep the title, but lots of people aren't very happy about it, who understand that she strong-armed her kids to be called prince and princess when the palace didn't really want it, right? We understand the nuances, the differences between a working royal and a non-working royal. The point is, right, that Meghan's audience is the rest of the 5 billion people on the planet who are on Facebook, who have no idea. And my point is that to the whole rest of the world, the people who aren't invested in the royal story, being a Duchess is something, right? It is something. Being an HRH, even if you're not entitled to use it, they don't know the difference. And it's like the same thing when Prince Andrew appears on the steps of the church with the king. The rest of the world, we understand that Andrew is a member of the family, but not a member of the working royal. But the other 98% of the people on digital social media, which is how all this stuff is being consumed, have absolutely no idea about that. And what that means is that she is still a massive focus of media attention when she does events. And she's still by far the biggest driver of traffic on the internet in terms of a name. If you want to write a story and you want people to read it and it's got Meghan in it and it's about Meghan and about Meghan doing something, it will drive a lot of traffic. There's just no denying that. So that's what I mean. I don't mean that she is a important person in a way, but I mean that she's still of great interest to the media. And I think that what the palace have done incredibly successfully by exiling them, by cutting them off by starving them of attention, by not really allowing them back to the UK through this security thing, is it's completely the playbook of Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson, right? And they were only allowed, Edward, I think, only came back to the country kind of 4 times, always for funerals, and indeed his own funeral. And what that did was it starved him of attention and meant that he frankly died a very unimportant person. And Wallis was, after people, in the fashion world, and I know there's a movie coming out with Joan Collins and, all of that playing Wallis. But actually, they didn't really have any influence at the end of, very quickly after the break with the palace. Harder to do that for the palace today because of the global media, because, if Meghan wanted, she could start a YouTube channel. I'm sure it'd be very successful.
Yeah, if I was advising her, I don't know why she doesn't ditch the title, because I think she would actually be more popular. I think people would see it. I mean, I shouldn't give her any ideas, but it would really sort of lean into that rebel, someone that really had a bone to pick with the institution and the public face of that institution, and she was standing up against it, with integrity, and that would have made her famous, like really famous. I get what you're saying. She attracts the media attention, but that level she's seeking, I think she would have got it if she had have rejected the titles.
I absolutely agree, because it's entirely hypocritical. It's totally hypocritical, right? To on one hand be slagging off the royal family, and on the other hand, exploiting the title. As you say, it doesn't have authenticity, credibility. And she probably would do much better as Meghan and Harry. And I got the impression that was definitely the idea at the beginning. But I
Mm.
think part of the whole problem with Meghan is, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? Do you want to be Meghan and Harry? Do you want to be Duchess Meghan? Do you want to be HRH Meghan? Do you want to be this woman in a white suit looking like Mother Teresa or Princess Diana? Or do you
Or
want to be someone
Gandhi.
just cruising through the streets of Paris, or Gandhi? Or do you want to be someone just cruising through the streets of Paris with your feet up on a chair, who's really chilled out and really good fun and really great fun? So there's a massive sort of identity crisis at the core of Meghan's brand, which we see in these endless reiterations and this endless trying to be everything. You know, am I doing, you know, mass market jam, or am I doing $50,000 couture gowns and Balenciaga? I mean, the two do not go together, right? The two do not go together. And I just felt also, and this is what was weird, she just, and my sister mentioned this when I was doing the live with her on my Substack the other day. She just didn't look very happy. She didn't look like she was having a good time. She didn't look like she was having fun. They did release an Instagram video later that was a sort of behind the scenes thing that, you know, had the usual signature, you know, jolly upbeat music, as my subtitles called it. Upbeat music now playing. But she didn't look like she was having a great time. Like, if I,
she was doing the model face though. She was doing the model face. Well, she was trying to, but I thought Plum made a great point that
Plum was very funny about that.
Yeah, she was. And she was also funny about the fact that, you know, really she will never make one of these grand fashionistas, because she always looks for the camera. And they never do. They never look for the camera. And she's always looking for the camera. Did you see that bit?
Do you know what, though? I bet she stops. I bet she stops now that Plum's told her to.
Yeah. Probably. Did you see that thing, that moment with when the model stumbled and she was the only one in the whole row that laughed, and right next to Marcus Anderson? And did you see? Now you might be able to give us some insight into this, because you probably know the dynamics of that relationship a little bit better than I do. I always thought that they were just mates, that he helped her do all the social climbing, you know, managed to create that network that got her eventually to Harry. But he seemed more like a handler, because he really admonished her. I mean, it wasn't a mate saying, oh, you're such, you know, that the eyes of a mate saying, oh, you're such a dag God, I can't take you anywhere. Like that sort of friend response. It was real admonishment with his eyes, like, oh, really? Come on. Get yourself together, girl. You know. And then she sort of stopped.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I mean, so all the video that I've seen of it, I completely agree with you on your analysis of the way that he responds to her laughing. I haven't actually seen any video that shows this model stumbling. So I don't actually know what caused her to laugh. And I'm slightly nervous of whether that is actually the case, or whether it was just a nervous laugh about something else. But just because I haven't, have you seen video of the model actually stumbling? I haven't actually seen it.
No.
But I don't know.
Although there was a reaction, not a laugh, but there was a reaction, not the woman next to her, but the woman next to that woman. There was a reaction. She raised her eyebrows.
Right.
So something happened. But you're right.
Yeah,
we don't
know.
It
seems not unreasonable. Well, it seems not unreasonable to conclude that perhaps a model stumbled, or a model tripped, or something, you know, a bit slapstick happened that made her laugh. But yeah, he's kind of cold, isn't he? He's kind of cold the way he looks at her. And so does
that make you think that she was his plus one? Like, was he the one with the ticket and the connections?
No, I mean, I think they wanted Meghan there because it got them all the headlines. I mean, funnily enough, one of the things people are actually nervous about inviting Meghan to their events is that it overshadows everything else. So actually, as a serious designer, you might actually argue that it might be more valuable to have Anna Wintour, you know, who was in the front row, as the focus of media coverage of your story. And one of the risks of having Meghan is that the Meghan drama, the Meghan whirlwind, completely wipes everything else off the front page. But back to the relationship with Anderson. I mean, you know, look, he's the membership manager for Soho House, so I'm sure he knows what side his bread is buttered, and I'm sure he also knows how to handle yourself and how to behave appropriately, these things. And I think it's sort of what I really felt about it was I just felt it showed, like, for all Meghan's media profile and all this and all that, just showed like how rarely they actually go out and do anything like fun. Do you know what I mean? That like she just sort of in a way didn't really know how to handle herself. It was like, it was a very, very strange moment. I used to do media training myself, and one of the things that you really see, and I'm sure you've done media training for people, Shauna, and one of the things that you do really see when people are very nervous, they sometimes smile like that, and it's an awful thing because people can be announcing very serious news and they can be going like this, and it's not that they think it's funny that like a bus has crashed or whatever. It's just a weird sort of nervous reaction, and we can actually all do it. And anybody will know you've had this experience of talking to someone and the face doesn't match up. So look, I'm inclined to be charitable and say, that I don't know what happened, but I did really notice the difference between Marcus Anderson, who's at those events every night of the week, like it was like, hey, keep your game face. I mean, it was quite a striking moment.
Yeah, very much so. It was just now I found the limo Paris thing, you've sort of changed your tune a little bit, because with Plum you thought it was like maybe a glass or too much champagne, she wasn't thinking. Then you've sort of said in your piece in the Daily Beast that it was staged. She's very, capable of staging herself, and you actually attributed it to sort of like a celebrity vibe, limo lights, the whole thing. That is way too charitable for me, because I'm just thinking of, like, this is from the same person. You're the same person that told us that you thought that Diana might have been tragically murdered in the tunnel, right? So you obviously take this extremely seriously. Don't you see the effect that would have had on Harry? That clip?
I thought it was incredibly weird. I thought it was an incredibly weird thing to post. I think that they've, not to me directly, but I've seen in other media that they seem to have come out and said, "Oh, it was just an innocent." It just does not really stack up for me. I think that I think that going to Paris in itself on your own, I think is a deliberate echo. I felt that the clothing that she was wearing, the white thing, was a very deliberate echo of Princess Diana in Pakistan.
Yes.
I just can't quite believe that she posted that video. I find it really, really weird, and I did find an element of staging around it.
Yes.
I do also think though that it seems to have been done. What I meant when I was talking to Plum and I said the glass of champagne, it seems to have been done on her own. It doesn't seem to have gone through the usual committee that her social media often goes through, which is why I felt that it might just have felt like to her like a good idea in the moment. It doesn't, like, we all know, right? If you are a brand trying to manage your brand on social media, you need to be very careful and very intentional about what you post. And Meghan, for all her faults, is very careful and very intentional. Nothing is posted by accident or just as a casual thing. But it did seem to me that hadn't, well, exactly, but B, it slightly seemed to me that hadn't gone through the usual vetting process. Do you think that had been?
No, she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing. Absolutely knew it. 100%.
I mean, how could you not? How could you not? That's the thing. Like, I'm so
look, if it was innocent, Tom, she would have aimed a phone at the Eiffel Tower. They went past the Eiffel Tower when they were actually sort of around the start of that trip at the Pont Alexandre III. You can, off to your left, once you get up on that bridge, you can see the Eiffel Tower. It would have been a great shot. There was so many other, points that she could have done an innocent shot that it wouldn't have looked like that. And I honestly think it was cynical. And I think that her cross-leg thing, I think that, I'm sure she had a seatbelt on, but I think it was supposed to imply that she didn't. I think it was all a cynical thing. Yeah. But anyway, I won't harp on.
No, do tell me. No, do harp on. Why, what So, okay, so let's say that it's done deliberately and it's done cynically. And I agree with the feet on the thing. It was weird. It was like, it would be uncomfortable to have your seatbelt on if your feet were up like that. It would. So, what do you think is behind it? Just a very deliberate attempt to say, I am married to Princess Diana's son and we need
I
security.
think it was the comms that came out almost immediately where it was saying, here we have another example of a confident woman who, wowed Europe being smashed by the British press. Now, that came out
Right.
very
Yeah.
quickly after. And it was
Yeah.
almost, to me, it was just like, oh, that's the narrative. Because it
Right. Right.
wasn't enough to just have the success and everything. They wanted to introduce the victimhood tail end, because that just gets her days and days and days of press and sympathy and
Yeah.
argument and us talking about it like we are now. And so look,
Did you see Piers Morgan, speaking of the victimhood, did you see Piers Morgan? There was some
no, I
excerpts
haven't
from Piers
watched him.
Morgan's book
No,
in the Mail, and he was
no.
very interesting, talking about how that culture of presenting yourself as the victim was totally their strategy in the kind of early years, but that now the world's kind of moved on a bit, and where once that looked like very in sync with, you remember Piers Morgan got fired from his job
Yeah,
for, I
yeah.
don't know, saying that he didn't believe that
Her,
Meghan,
her
I don't know,
suicide thing. Yeah,
yes, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Cast aspersions on that.
And then she very much, and he's very interesting actually about how they marketed themselves as victims when they're clearly they've done pretty well in the game of life, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not like
yeah.
they've. So yeah, it's really interesting. I found it bizarre. I found it a really bizarre video to shoot, and I'm baffled. I'm baffled by it. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's pretty. It's interesting when you look at polls and data and stuff. I've been going back and looking at all that just to see. And there was a point in America where the victimhood narrative actually made them plummet. And
Mm,
just after the Netflix docu drama. Now Harry was in positive
mm,
points in the USA, and he went to -7. And it was said, all the experts, pollsters said, well, look, it's just fatigue with victimhood. They just
yeah,
can't
yeah.
take it anymore. And so that's where they're
And it
going
is
wrong.
like, also, it is boring to read because, like, we've all got problems, mate. We've all got issues in our lives. We've all got
Yeah.
things we're trying to solve. We've all got, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like,
Yeah.
frankly, like, you've never had a financial worry in your life.
Yeah.
You grew up in a palace, and anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. We know. We know. Okay. I want to get on to your spat
But yeah,
with,
no, bottom line, sorry, can I just say one more
yeah,
thing about the
you
Paris
can.
thing? I
Yes.
thought it was extraordinary, and I thought it was an incredibly stupid clip to post.
Right. Well, we're in agreement on that. You had a spat with Tobin Andre, which fascinates
Yes,
me. I saw your
yes.
Daily Beast piece when it happened, and you didn't really spell out the fact to everybody that it was actually you he chucked out of the WhatsApp group. And then you've done a more recent piece where
Yes.
you really go into it in great detail. Now, I did a video on this. I didn't even know that you were the one that was made an example of and everything. I did a video on that, ranting and raving about the fact that it just wasn't good enough that the palace could heavy any press group, at all. Because, I mean, freedom of the press is pretty important, one would think. So tell us about that spat with Tobin and how how it all unfolded.
So basically, the palace don't want people to write about Charles's health, right? And in the UK, they can control it, and they can control it in two ways. They can control it, because of this thing called the Royal Rota. Rota's a slightly confusing word. Just think of it as a press pool. It's like an authorized press pool that are included in a WhatsApp group for the domestic press pool, and then there's a WhatsApp group for the international press pool. I've been part of that for whatever 15 years or something. It was set up, I think, it was originally set up by journalists to sort of improve cooperation with the palace. So just, and much like, there's nothing particularly sinister about it. It's mainly kind of operational stuff, but occasionally there'd be interesting stuff. Like if there's going to be a video later that day, they'll let you know a few hours early, just stuff like that. So, but the reality is that, for me, it's never been a massively important part of my reporting. And then they started this, then whenever you tried to write about the King's health, basically, you'd get all this pushback, get told that it was outrageous, that what you were saying was wrong. I mean, I wrote a story about the preparations for Charles's funeral, for example, that said that now that he was monarch, the plans for his funeral would now be called London Bridge, not Menai Bridge. And, I got kind of emails telling me that this was wildly inaccurate, that this was, all this stuff. So it was brewing for a while. And then I wrote a story that just said that Charles's cancer was incurable, and that he was going to die with it, which is pretty much common knowledge to people who don't only read the UK papers. But if you only read the UK papers, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Charles has a serious cold. Do you know what I mean? Because because it's been so incredibly well managed, and occasionally snuck in there in the British reporting, there'll be a line like, despite being seriously unwell, or despite being incredibly unwell, or oh, the reign is not expected to last very long, or this kind of, it'll just be like some weird throwaway sentence, which is how they're trying to cover their arse. So that if Charles does, which let's hope he doesn't, and the treatments are incredible these days, and I'm sure he'll live for, many years. But if he does die in 6 months' time, which, can happen with cancer, I'm afraid so many of us who've dealt with friends or ourselves or our family with cancer, and I think things change really fast. They want to kind of cover themselves. So, but back to my specific argument. So after sort of several months, they couldn't really put the same pressure on me. A, because my reporting's never been dependent on briefings from press officers, and B, because I'm not publishing in the UK, so you're not subject to the same like Leveson guidelines. And I do have some sympathy with the British media, and my friends, who still work for the British newspapers will say, look, man, it's not that we're trying to cover up or hide or in cahoots. It's actually the law. After the Leveson inquiry, your health it's considered under legislation that you have a right to privacy on matters concerning your health. So as one journalist explained to me, if somebody came to him with documentary evidence that King Charles had, liver cancer, and said that he's got 4 months to live, they couldn't report it because you have a legal. It would just contravene the legal rules. So you'd get a massive fine, and you'd be put into special measures and all that kind of stuff. That said, there's no reason why I can't report a completely legitimate story about the King's health and about the fact that, I've been very clearly told that he is, got incurable cancer, right?
Well,
it's a fact. And what's really interesting, right, and it's really interesting, they didn't even disagree on grounds of of accuracy. They just said it was tasteless. Well, I mean, honestly, it's a bit late. You've lived a very sheltered life as the King of England if you're going to be offended on grounds of taste, I think, and I thought it was ridiculous. I didn't really care. But then and so they threw me out of the WhatsApp group and blah, blah, and I was like, fine, whatever. It's been a long time coming. And like, good luck. See you later. But then another journalist called me up to ask me about it. And that's when I knew that they were using me as an example to say to the other media, oh, well, this is what happened to this guy. Right. Actually, initially, I thought it was just to discredit me, that they were saying that I'd been kicked out. Like, well, you can't trust him. He's a complete rogue reporter, blah, 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 blah. But then I realized that it was to threaten other people to stay in line when they threatened the Telegraph with being expelled from the Rota after they did a story saying that Harry was going to be invited to Charles's funeral.
Yes, it was the
and that's when I realized, that's when I realized. So look, I actually kind of, do you know what? I've been in the game a long time, Shauna, and I've dealt with all kinds of different press secretaries over the years, and like they have the right to deal with the media how they want, and their job, right, is to try and control the media, and our job is to not be controlled. And it's just the thing that annoys me is that the British media have just been so pathetic and just rolled over. And you know what? In the old days, what would have happened when he sent that message to the entire WhatsApp group saying the Telegraph have been absolutely disgraceful reporting on, yeah, so this is how effective throwing someone out of a WhatsApp group with 20 people is, by the way. Do you know what I mean? So he sent, after I'd been thrown out, he sent a message to the whole WhatsApp group going, Telegraph are disgraceful. Like, they shouldn't have reported this. It's demise planning, it's very sensitive, and it's completely wrong. Although obviously they'd been briefed by the palace. Anyway, and then he said, if anybody reports on, if anyone follows this story or reports on this, i.e. Harry being invited to the funeral, they'll be excluded from all bridge planning, right? London Bridge, which is the, code name for the funeral. In the old days, I'll tell you what would have happened, right? We'd have all gone down the pub, right? And we'd have had a couple of pints and we'd have gone, let's all do it tomorrow. Let's all do that story, and that's what they should have done. They should have all written the story the next day. And instead, they set a really bad precedent because they all rolled over and didn't cover the story, which, so honestly, if you want to read the real truth, I know, if you want to read the real truth about what's going on in the palace, the British media is just a complete joke. And this whole thing of, there's been absolutely no follow-up of Charles taking €1 million in used €500 notes in Fortnum and Mason bags. I mean, that story's just completely disappeared. No one's ever covered it or followed it up. And just the whole, it's just absolutely, it's absurd. And as I say, if you read the British media right now, all you'll read is Charles is doing so well, everything's great, his health is marvelous. It's like, it's rubbish. It's rubbish. He's having weeks of radiotherapy. Like, I feel for the man. I wouldn't want my health to be a matter of, discussed in public, but it's a hereditary monarchy. Like when he died, it's like, it's not like anybody else. It's not like a normal person. So I've been very defiant. And Joanna Coles, my editor at the Daily Beast, before I started Substack, and I'm still working for the Daily Beast, has been brilliant. And she's just backed me to the hill. And she's just been like, good for you, Tom, and I do. And I just think at the end of the day, like, being excluded from a WhatsApp group is just absolute, and it's pathetic. And then, of course, so I've done this massive story over the past 3 months about the conflict between Charles and William, which I've been working on, and I've completely led all the reporting on it. A lot of the UK papers started to follow it, and then suddenly they all dropped it, and there was all these stories rubbishing my reporting, saying that they were having father and son bonding time in Scotland, that they were, all this stuff, which is just complete rubbish. They weren't having father and son. William was going shooting with his mates. No,
I've heard that
miles away from his father. It's just complete rubbish. I heard that from you, rubbish.
But I also heard it from other people, and I completely believe you're reporting about that. And also the other concern is the fact that, they're controlling this so tightly. You could argue that the whole Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson thing didn't need to happen, because if they had have reported on it a lot sooner, look back in 2022 when the Salman Turk court case thing was happening, they briefly reported on it. They got an answer from the palace. The explanations from the palace were absolutely ridiculous. Like, no one would believe them. A 10-year-old wouldn't believe the excuses they presented. They could have niggled, they could have questioned, they could have interviewed, they could have followed that up. But they just dropped it. They just drop everything. And I just find that really concerning.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, Andrew Loney, who you've had on the show, I mean, he's obviously the chapter and verse and the expert on this. I mean, what he's had to go through to publish that book, the threats that he's faced, the attempts to ruin him personally by the establishment. I mean, it's unbelievable. Actually, there's a whole nother book in what Andrew's had to actually go through to get that book out. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for him to
Yeah.
finally, get one in the eye to the establishment, because he's done an incredible job. And and I think, yeah, I think that, the press, I think the press have tried with Andrew, and I think, they've uncovered a lot of stuff about Andrew over the time. But I don't, when somebody is protected by the king, it's a very, very hard situation for them.
Mm.
Because do they, they're back in the same position that they're in now. And unfortunately, every time they surrender on one thing, makes it more and more likely that they're going to surrender on the next thing. And you're right, we need, this whole Andrew thing is a completely ridiculous. But frankly, I mean, it's Charles's doing. Why on earth he decided to bring them back into the family, why he decided to continue, no one can fathom. No
No.
one can fathom. The whole thing was settled when the Queen died. The whole thing was settled. Andrew did not go to church that year. He had to go in the morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something when he couldn't be seen.
Yeah.
And for some reason, King Charles decides that it's a great idea to start inviting them, and to start inviting Sarah Folkestone. I mean, she's not even married to him. She's not even married
No.
to him. She's like a disgrace. She's like openly corrupt. She's nakedly corrupt. She tried to sell access to her. I mean,
Yeah.
what more red flags do you need? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
incredible. So the whole Andrew thing is a complete mess. I think that actually quite a bit of the British newspaper reporting about Andrew has been pretty good. But I think that they have definitely, the Andrew and Fergie have definitely benefited from being protected by the palace and by the institution, as Andrew will tell you.
Yeah. Just before you go, I know you've got to go, but I just want to quickly get on to Michael Fawcett because you did mention it.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
there's an example of someone constantly being brought back into the fold because he left in 1998 and came back. He went in 2003 because all the staff complained about him that he was a big bully, and so he ended up resigning. And then, interestingly, Camilla actually brought him back and admonished all the staff. He was back within a week. And then finally, of course, the big one, Cash for Honours. And interestingly, that was all being looked into until King Charles ascended to the throne, and then it was all killed, and then
Yeah.
it was nothing to see
Yeah.
here. We're not
Nothing to
going there.
see. Yeah.
Now, the
Yeah.
reason why I'm
Yeah.
bringing it up, I know that's all old news, but evidently a few months ago he had a meeting, you've reported on this, with Michael Fawcett. It was like a big military operation sneaking him in for this final farewell, and it was actually broken by the Mail on Sunday on October the 4th. So, another stupid, unwise move because now it's got out. And what's that going to do except drag everything up again?
I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it? It's completely unnecessary as well. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like, it's all these unforced errors that Charles makes. And I'm afraid there's a lack of ruthlessness at the core of Charles. And the Michael Fawcett story is incredible, right? He started off polishing silver as a footman for the Queen when he was 19 years old. He rose to become literally Charles's right-hand man, famously squeezing the toothpaste onto his toothpaste brush when he'd broken his arm playing polo. And that story is so iconic that actually there was a piece in the New Yorker this week where Federico Marchetti, who's a Italian fashion guy who's involved with the king, gave Charles a chrome toothpaste squeezer as a joke. And I slightly wondered how Michael Fawcett felt when he said that Charles found it jolly amusing. But that's neither by the by. So the Fawcett story is an incredible example of, the sort of courtly, it's an amazing morality story, isn't it? Really, of you get so close to the king. It really reminds me of Thomas Cromwell in Hilary Mantel's book Wolf Hall, where, although he's not really, but there's just a line that he says where he says, how many people can honestly say, my only friend is the King of England? And it's a very, very dangerous position to be in, right? If
Yeah.
your only ally is the king and everybody else hates you, because what happens is you become a scapegoat. Now, does anybody really believe that Michael Fawcett organised a massive cash farm scandal? He just woke up one morning was eating his scrambled eggs and said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to offer some guy British citizenship if he gives £1 million to my boss's charity." Like, come on. Like, so
Yeah.
I have a bit of sympathy for Michael FAWCETT, and I
Yeah.
suppose that's why Charles gave him the final audience, was to but
Work out a
I
deal.
also, yeah, but I also strongly suspect that it wasn't going to be the final audience until they were rumbled. And then, I'm sure it was to test the water and see whether, relations could be restored,
Yeah.
because Charles obviously misses him. He famously said, I simply can't do without Michael. There's no one I could do
Yeah.
without except Michael, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that there definitely was a plan to restore relations, but I think, having been rumbled, I think that Charles has accepted that FAWCETT has to be sacrificed, and it was pretty brutal. The comment they
Yeah.
gave to the Times afterwards, it was a final farewell audience.
Yeah. Was brutal. And do you think maybe it was brutal just for, public consumption, but they have a deal between each other that they're all okay and they're
I
still
don't think
close?
he can see him again. I don't think, after issuing that statement, I actually don't think even Charles would risk seeing him again. But
They might have a
who
WhatsApp
knows? You never
group.
know.
They might have a WhatsApp group, Tom.
They might have a WhatsApp group, Shauna. They could have a WhatsApp group.
They could. Imagine. Are you any good at hacking?
No. That's after my
Good
time.
answer. Good answer. Either am
It's
I.
weird, isn't it? Have you noticed
Yeah.
all of these stories coming out now that seem to be based on, look like they're based on intercepted social media messages, and that is
Yeah.
going to be a whole nother scandal when that happens. I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we've worn out my headphones, so I think we better go.
Yeah. Okay, we've got to go. See, you're just so fascinating. Okay. Thanks, Tom. I'll see you again next month.
Thanks, Shauna. See you then.
Okay.
Bye.
Awkward goodbye. I'm going to click out right now. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I'll read your chat once I click out. Bye.